Right, hello everyone, and everyone who just decided to come in and sit down for 5 minutes, welcome. My name's Simon Meacher, and I'm going to talk a little bit about data modeling and how we need to start moving it away from a one-man band operation. So, as you can see, I am a part-time stash model, and I have been on websites. In my spare time, I'm the founder of Engaging Data, a small data consultancy down in Southampton. So, apologies for those who are familiar with the terms data modeling and what it means, but just to recap, data modeling is, in simple terms, a way of creating a diagram or an understanding or a design that represents your data systems and defines data entities and structures and relationships of that data. It often helps to produce data process maps in how the data is created and understanding of where that data is stored and how it's stored as well within your systems. Traditionally, this will help to simplify the data and help companies use that data in more efficient ways. And more recently, it's being used for things like AI and machine learning, rather than the traditional reporting and visualizations that you get across most companies. It also now is starting to be used for APIs and connectivities between different systems. And it helps to inform the technology team, the IT team, on how best to structure the data and store the data so you can start to control costs and control costs and computing and storage of that system. I've got a little example there of a very, very simple conceptual model. So data modeling has been around for some time, and those of you you absolutely understand and be familiar with things like the Kimball and the Inman methodologies, and more recently we've had the upgrade to Data Vault 2.0, but there has been an evolution of data modeling, and this is really from a commercial point of view. Initially it was set by General Mills and Dartmouth College, where they started to define things like dimensions and facts, before it then got commercialized and sold out to other companies to start replicating this kind of data model to help in their organizations. And since then, the topic's been discussed and adopted and changed, and in my career, over 20 odd years, I've seen lots of different variations and lots of different companies take the principles and start to do their own thing with it. More recently, you'll see the adaptation of data modeling into data lakes, and again, as I mentioned, AI, where we're starting to store data in a slightly different format from a traditional data warehouse. Okay, lost my way, sorry. Let's move on. Okay. So that to one side around what data modeling can do and what it's used for. The way we build data models has varied in the last sort of 15, 20 years. For me personally, I can remember being trained specifically to be a one-man band data modeler in an insurance company, where I was expected to know all the different aspects of how the data was created, what business processes sat behind the data, all the way through to how to model conceptually, logically, physically, and then engineer it right at the very end. For me, and for many others, that's quite a lot. It's quite a big role. So we like to sort of think about the skill sets required to make a good data model, because when one person does it, me, I can get lots of it wrong. And that's because I don't have the knowledge. So one key aspect would be the business knowledge. So when you set out to make a data model, business knowledge is critical. The business team know where all the bodies are buried. They know how the system is used, how the data is created, and how it's stored. They know what part of the system is being used, what telephone number field is being used to store the postcode or the email address. They know how if you put that value in that field, it means something else over here, and there's system rules going on. So they're your best friends. They're your allies. They're also the people who help you define the requirements. I started off building data models where you'd write down the data model, you get a document, you get people to sign it off, you'd get your requirements, and you tie it all together, it'd all be written down, then you go and build it. And that created so much of a headache, because quite often there's so much that you didn't think about up front and you miss. So having your best friend business person who has the requirement, who knows what value they're trying to get from the business, they're innovating themselves, they're often doing something to save money or make money. Use them to build your requirements. Help them get in a room with the business people, the people who are going to help you write the requirements, and start talking about everything around the requirements. What value you're trying to build, what questions, what business questions are you trying to work towards? That can then help the data modeler sit down and derive those questions into something a bit more actionable and a bit more of you starting to move towards a data model itself. So there are lots of different ways of creating those requirements. I often use like a business events analysis model where you sit down and you'll be creating use cases. So what example have I got here? Oh no, I'm thinking of an example later on. So, but you'd be going like, Simon wants to know how much sales there are for the department. That's the requirement, okay? That's the start of the business model. You now know that there's going to be some aspects of sales, and Simon is a part of the business. He works in the sales team, so he's a user in a team, and those things can help define the entity. All these things help to drive the data modeler to start doing the conceptual model, and the conceptual models will help to create the entities of the data model and the relationships between the aspects. So, as I said about the sales, was where you're going to keep all your metrics, and then you have a user or a person, and then how is that related? So that then, once that's been defined out from that one use case, you can then start to build the logical model to go, right, in the sales entity, what do we want to know? Well, we want to have total sales, number of products. That's the start of the logical model, and where you'll then start to answer some more fine details. Okay, so we go back to Simon's use case about he wants to know total sales. Okay, what does total sales actually mean? Are we including tax? Are we taking tax out? Are there business rules behind that? This is a conversation that needs to happen. It can't happen on a piece of paper. It needs to be collaborative with the person in the business and the person writing the requirements down. Once you get that far, you can then start to talk about the physical model and how that's going to look. Okay, so the physical model is really when you start to take the logical model and all the fine details of all the fields that you need in your data model. Where does it come from in the system? So, for instance, if we're going to pull out all the employees, what's the name of the table in the system that lives, and how do we pull it into our storage? What we're going to call it at that point? Do we need to do any transformation on it? Where does it end up? That's the logical model. It will start to create a journey for that. The data engineer at this point needs to be brought in, because the data engineer will know what's technically capable to achieve inside your business. So you might not have a tool that can easily grab the data out of that system. And I talk to a lot of companies who want to do this, and they just don't. They're using something that doesn't talk to another thing. And then that gets missed. So if you've done all the business requirements and you've spoken to the business team and they've derived what they want, and it's not technically possible, then you want to do that up front. You don't want to wait weeks and weeks to be told no. So the engineers are really important. Also, they can often tell you if there's something that might not work straight away. So again, you might want to build a dashboard that streams the data from the system, the transactional system, straight through to the dashboard so the CEO can see what the sales are doing today. But you might not have a platform that can stream data out. So you might end up having a bit of a clash of requirements. All of these kinds of questions, all of these sorts of conversations have to happen in a collaborative way. Because if we don't start working collaboratively on these, we can end up like the rocket and nosedive pretty much straight away. So often when we start talking through the problems of data modeling, we will be looking at the aspects that can go wrong. So the first thing we've got on, number 4 we've got on there, is the software development lifecycle. So that can be it can be a sword and a shield as far as the team that's there to build out the data model, because it can create structure. And there's we probably all know people that have gone off and built a data model completely independently of any IT team, and then they've gone, da-da, productionize that. And then you go, well, there's no standards in here, and there's no, it's built rickety, there's chewing gum on this bit, there's sticky tape on that bit, and it's not going to stand up. So you can get quality from a decent software development life cycle, but you can also get a lot of pain, because you can have a process built for an application, and you're going to try to do some data-y stuff with it, so it doesn't quite match up. So you have to be careful that you've got the right life cycle set up to help you. Human error is a big problem in all of this. I forget things all the time. The people I work with forget things all the time. The number of dashboard projects or data projects where you get to the end of it and go, oh yeah, I forgot. That system doesn't work on a Tuesday, so we can't take data out every day. Those sorts of things really throw a spanner in the works. So despite with the best intentions in the world, you've got to be careful of the team that you've got in. Also, you've got to be careful of the team that you're using, because you need to have the high availability. So if you're going to collaborate on a data model with a business team, are they available the entire time for the project? Is the data modeler available, or is he part of a small team which is under high demand, or is he part of a larger team and he doesn't really know his role? The team itself that you put together to start data modeling, have you got proper defined roles? Does everyone know what they're there to do? Don't have too many cooks. One business person is generally enough, with maybe someone supporting. If you get 2 in, they can then start squabbling, and then requirements go off. They end up splitting, and then you end up having more things to do. You have a data model that doesn't quite work. I see a lot of people nodding and smiling. It's familiar, right? It's the sort of thing that we find happens all the time. Also, skills gaps are really important, because we find that you can have a brand new person to the business who doesn't really know how the processes work. That person can be really enthusiastic, like a little puppy, wants to help, wants to do stuff. But when you get to the point of asking them a question about how does that system actually work, they haven't got the experience. So we need to be careful that we bring in the right person from the business, as much as we need to be careful with the right person writing, interpreting those requirements down into something more technical for the data modeler, because that translation is very important. And if you get it wrong, you can set your data model off on a completely different path. And also your data modelers. I know so many data modelers that are really good at the conceptual, but the logical side is their weakest part. Myself, I've got struggles in the whole process, bits where I have to work harder, think harder to get through. There's different types of models that I just like, data vault. Oh, it's going to take me another 10 years to get my head around all of the permutations of how you can build a proper data vault. But I'm really enthusiastic about it. But enthusiasm doesn't necessarily mean success. But, making sure you have that right, the right skills gap. And remember, data modeling is extremely complex, especially when you start getting into things like time analysis, where everything's a point on time. We've done some work with banks and wealth management companies where you have a humongous amount of data pinpointed to a single point in time. And you start off with building a data, we built a data model. It was set to consume a certain amount of data a day. It ended up using 3 times that amount of data in one day. And it was an extremely painful load process that just didn't work. So be wary of those critical points of change that can impact your data model. Toolings and limitation. You're all going to have different tools. You're all going to have different tools to collaborate with teams. But also you're going to have to be careful of what tool sets you have to take that data model, collaborate the data model itself, Document it, share it, make sure everyone's happy with the terms, and then how do you take that data model and turn it into something useful? And finally, the approach. Are you going to go agile? Are you doing waterfall? Don't stop one thing halfway through and do something different. If you're going to set out your agile process, keep it agile. If you're doing waterfall, don't mix the two, because that is a really big problem. Points 3 and 1 need to be resolved on a company basis. Can't deal with that. It's cultural. It's something you're going to have to try and work your way through. But points 4 and 2 are something you can put in place to assist yourself and make things a bit easier. So this is what I'm going to suggest you look out for in a tool. So from an end user tool, when you're data modeling, preferably you want something easy to use. There are plenty of entity relationship diagram tools out there that are just the most complex and really detailed, and that's brilliant, but sometimes you need just enough, not war and peace. It needs to help you innovate, prototype quickly, fail fast, all those good words. But ultimately, if you're collaborating with people on a data model, can you build it? Can you test it? Can you show it? Does it look right? Can we get that consensus in a 30-minute meeting and then carry on with the development? Does the tool help enable data analysis and profiling of the data as you go? Also, it needs to be able to consume data from many different places and many different formats. I'm going to exclude things like unstructured data, just assume we're talking about structured data. But we also need to think about plugging into data governance systems. Whether they exist or not, we should probably have something in place to cover that in the future. Making collaboration easy is also very important. Sharing the information that you collect as you start designing, sharing pictures, forms, documents of how the design is going to look and what we've recorded so far, especially when you're talking about business terms, converting technical columns into columns the business understand, terms the business understand. Does the platform enable multiple designers to work on a data model at once? If you're lucky enough to have a big enough team to be able to collaborate like that, you probably want to have that. So the other outputs the tools need to be looking to create are easy to understand data models. Can we create pictures, designs of the various stages of the data model, especially when you start to get into logical models and physical models, and you want to start to describe how the data is going to be processed from A to B? It needs to be able to support, can it support the creation of the physical model? Can you start a conceptual model and then get the tool to convert it into a logical model, then create the information you need to be able to build the physical model? Or are they all component parts? You can do this in Word and Excel. Do it in PowerPoint, but you can't build an SQL statement or build table statement from PowerPoint. So it's really important. If you've got a tool, you need a tool to speed you up, right? And that's the final part. Does it integrate with CI/CD? There's been quite a lot of work on this in the last couple of years, and now tools are starting to automate the design of a data model straight through to the physical platform. And wouldn't it be great if your data modeling tool could help do that? So this is what I suggest you, if you're interested in doing this, you go away and you reflect and look at your approach. Does your approach change? Do you have different departments that have different approaches that could stop you being streamlined? Often IT teams can be broken up. You could have approval processes that are done in a waterfall manner, but then development processes that are built in an agile manner. When they come together, sometimes that can be quite painful and slow things up. Tooling. Does your tool, the tools that you use, is it set up for success? Are you able to model, collaborate, and then easily develop your data solution? And that's collaboration. Collaboration is key. There's so many different people that you need to build a good data model, and they need to be fingers on the pulse right up to the point where you publish it out. because there can be changes along the way, there can be questions over the data. So making sure that your whole process enables collaboration is critical. And then finally, we have the automated deployment. In this day and age, whatever we do, whenever we start to develop, we should be looking at streamlining the whole team so that we can scale as quickly as we can based on the team we have. And then the best problem in the world is you're overrun. You can push a lot out, you're very highly productive, but you haven't got a big enough team and you need to build the team out. So I'm here today with WhereScape, so we're on stand 19. So I'm happy to take conversations after this, but I'd like to open it up for questions.
Firstly, thank you for the session, really interesting. You talked about tooling and like how it's important to have collaboration and, you know, CI/CD integration. I wonder if you've got any like recommendations in terms of actual tools that you've used. Yeah.
Well, yeah, obviously, come and have a chat at the WhereScape tool stand, because that tool helps you to model the initial concept all the way through to the logical, and then produce everything you need to physicalize the data warehouse. But you know there are other tools that do some of this as well. So Power BI is a visualization tool that you can do all of the same sort of stuff, but maybe not productionize the ETL or ELT processes quite in the same way. What I'd say is there are lots of tools that you can do all of this with, but you probably want something that helps you do the whole thing in one go, or at least collaborates with your environments, like your data management system, your governance systems. It can interconnect with them in the same way. That's it. Okay, thank you very much for your time.